we would follow up with metaphysics and practical application. We still, if you have your charts here, if there's any questions you have about this, or any topics and themes you'd like to go into today, we'll use this time to dive down into these topics and come to clarity. Yes, Eva.
I want to know more about what it means that the script is already done.
Okay.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
It just means, I mean, the emphasis on the word is the last one. The script is written, is what the workbook says, and the last word is written. And that's a version of lesson number 7, I see only the past. So you might say that even though it seems like there's health issues, relationship problems, financial problems, all these things on the surface of the mind, it's really a time problem. And by a time problem, I mean that the ego has convinced the mind that time is still going on, and the Holy Spirit knows that it's already over. It's already been handled. It's already been corrected. So when you perceive, in typical human perception, you could say, here we are now in this room all sitting together. So we take the now and we put it with a perception, and we can say, all I want to do is remain present. You hear that a lot, whether it's the power of now or many spiritualities talk about being present. But the present moment is not perceptual. It's really a blazing light is what the present moment is. And the second thing is the present moment is not in between the past and the future, which we've come to believe. When we grow up, when we go to school, we go to history class, they draw a line on the board, on the blackboard, they put the little dots and the arrows, and they tell us about what happened and what the ice age and the glaciers and on, and then they go up and we get the dinosaurs and on, wars and so on and so forth, and then they put a little dot, meaning the present moment, and then they go on with another arrow into the future. But what Jesus teaches is the present is before time was. So grammatically that's a twister for your mind. The present is before time was. He said it in the Bible, before Abraham was, I am. That's from the Bible. He's saying the same thing, before Abraham was, I am. So when we talk about the present moment, we're not talking about like this perceptual moment where we're all sitting around a room, is common phraseology. So the script is written is basically saying that everything that's perceived through the 5 senses is all the past.
So that means that, for example, that's what's happening, I go here, stay here, and I come here, or you have that work, in this relation, everything is already written in the illusional world. Is that the illusion word we talk about when we say that the script is written?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
And yes, is it so then, this is the question I had before, is it so that we cannot choose anything because it's already done? I mean, I couldn't choose not to come here, I had to come here because it was already so. The film was already there.
Yeah, the trick of the ego is that you can choose among the past, or among the illusions, or among the images, and that you have a real choice. And this has been a big question in philosophy for many years, is everything destined, or do I have free will?
Yeah.
And usually when people ask that question, they associate free will with choice. So they're saying, is everything set and destined, or do I have a choice? And free will is for perfect happiness, but that's back up in heaven. So heaven doesn't have anything to do with choice, because there's nothing to choose between. One, everything's one, so there's nothing to choose between. And then in this world, the ego made up this world as a big trick to think that you have choice where there is no choice. So really it's all just the past, and if you choose to wear the red sweater or the blue sweater or the white sweater, those seem to be three distinct choices. But really there's the past, the past, the past. There's really no choice at all. So what's so scary is that the ego has made up this fake sense of choice, and then when people think about heaven, people will say to me, well, it sounds kind of boring. I don't know if I'd ever want to be in heaven. It sounds kind of bland and boring. Variety is the spice of life. The ego made up a lot of cliches to kind of make it seem very interesting, and yet as long as you're choosing among the images of form, among the past, you're really choosing where there is no choice. So it's just like a big fake, it's a fake world with fake choices. And some of them seem to be bigger choices than others. That's another trick. Whether I wear the white shirt or the red shirt seems to be different whether I'm going to date somebody or not, or marry somebody or not, or have a child or not, or divorce somebody or not. Those seem to be like major choices, but we're back to the red sweater and the blue sweater. It's everything that seems to be a choice in this world is a trick. And the more you go inside your mind, it's more like you're just a dreamer, or you're watching. Like there's a sense of recognition. You meet people, you feel like you've always known them. There's a sense of, I know you. Oh, I know you. I know you. It's a recognition that's very deep, like in your heart, even though your body's eyes may have never perceived that person before. It starts to take over. It's a vibrational thing. And the more that vibrational thing takes over, and the more you start to feel merged with this presence, with this sense of truly purpose, then you're really aware that it's all like part of a prearranged plan. From this presence, when you come here and they say, there's no toilets, or the toilets are out, you're like, okay, that was in the script. It's like, it's not a good thing, it's not a bad thing, it's just like, it's in the script. Now the script is a very linear construct still. It goes deeper than that, because the script is still like a story, and it's very linear, but actually if you go a little bit higher up in consciousness, you start to see that it's all simultaneous. Some of you have probably heard of parallel lifetimes, or parallel worlds. Yeah, it's all parallel. It's so parallel that it's all happening simultaneously. That's really parallel. So when you think, could I have taken this road, or could I have taken a different road? Well, yeah, potentially there's many, many, many options in potentiality, but the ego shrinks them down into one observation. So if you're looking out from your eyes now and you're seeing a room full of people, and you're seeing everyone sitting around and with these lights and me and the microphone and so forth, that this is like taking out of all the potential situations that there could ever be, this one has been shrunk down and chosen as a choice to see it as a specific situation that's real. And it's all based on belief. Everything that the mind perceives is based on a belief. So we're starting to get into quantum physics, which is like everything's potential. So everything's like in superposition as a potentiality, and then the mind, based on what it believes, it shrinks it down from the potential into something that seems to be specific and concrete.
The next question. So, for example, if this visualization thing, to visualization that I want to have a house like that or something like that, is it because I before know that this is going to be my house, or is it like I, by my thinking, make me come to that house?
Well, you could say that it's a little bit of both, in the sense that it's in the script. In other words, you're just tuning into something like the Akashic records, or like psychics do. How do psychics make predictions, with quite a lot of accuracy and everything? People have said, how can psychics read the future so accurately? And I say, well, what if they're just reading the past? Then, oh, well, that's no big deal. Anybody can read the past. I can look into the dictionary, and that's reading the past. But reading the future seems to be more special, because the future has not yet happened. But yeah, actually it has happened. The whole script, everything that was spun out in the Big Bang and everything, is all part of the script. Now, when you start to try to figure out the script is written, though, if you start to really try to figure it out, it's something you can experience, but you can't really figure it out because, again, it's linear. So it's just like a step on the ladder. You can't ever figure out a rung or a step. It's just another stepping stone to take your mind to, in awareness, to where it actually is. So the more you start having these kind of deja vu feelings, like I've been here before, that's just an example of the script is written and you're just remembering something. Or if you have a sense of, you meet somebody and it's like, it seems like I've met you before, or something, there's a strong feeling like that, that's another example of it. One time Helen Schuckman, the scribe of the Course, was like, she was with Jesus and she was like sailing along and watching the timeline, and she almost missed it, but her life as Helen Schuckman, between birth and death, was such a tiny little part of this giant timeline that she almost flew right past it. She just barely noticed it. And it just shows you that in human terms, a lifetime is huge. Think of all the memories that go into it, all those experiences. It seems enormous from the human perspective, and from a higher perspective, it's really insignificant. It's almost like you could miss it if you blinked. Oops, where's my life? Oh, you blinked. Too bad, you missed it. I mean, it just shows you how different the higher realms are from what we consider human perception, where everything here is magnified. Everything is blown out of proportion. Like on the news. Some of the news items they pick for the nightly news, it's kind of funny. It's broadcast all over, and you think, is that really important? Is that really significant? So-and-so's house burned down or got robbed or something like this, in the whole scheme of things, it's like the names and the faces change, but I had a friend that called it, she said they shouldn't call it the news, they should call it the olds, because it's just the same old, with different names and faces, and it's just repeated over and over and over. There's nothing new there. There's nothing new about the news. So the more you start to get into this, the more you start to realize that everything you're perceiving is the past. And then you start to relax more, because you realize that you can't change something that's already over.
No,
And
I think that is nice of you.
yeah, it's very relaxing.
Yeah.
You don't have that coulda, woulda, shoulda. Oh, if only I could have, and if only I would have, and if he would have, and she would have, then I could have, and it's, that's insanity.
I don't need to worry about what's going to happen, because I cannot do anything, it's already there.
Yeah.
I can be worried to death if this is going to happen, but what to do, because it's going to happen anyway.
Yeah, you could say that while you believe in time, it's important to just see that the Holy Spirit has only one purpose for time, and that's to show that it's not real. To eliminate it or show that it's not real. And the ego is using time to perpetuate the belief in linear time, and therefore perpetuate its own, to keep it going or to make it continue. And once you start to realize this, you really start to feel much more peace, because it's this sense of trying to figure out the world, or figure out your life in form, or understand the world, or plan for the world. You start to, it gets funnier and funnier, because you realize that it's not that you can do it, but you're not doing a good job of it. It's that you really can't do anything about it. I was showing a quantum physics movie recently called Down the Rabbit Hole, and from the quantum physics perspective, questions that seem to be meaningful to human beings are totally ridiculous when you get into a higher context. Like one of the scientists, the physicist, was saying, he said, it's like asking the question, what is the marital status of the number 5? It's not like it's a good question or a bad question. It's just pointless. It's absolutely, totally irrelevant. And so a lot of the questions that seem to be very big, important questions, to the ego, when you get higher up, you start to realize that it's like Shakespeare said, much ado about nothing. What is the marital status of number 5? I mean, philosophers wouldn't even waste time on that one. They would go, let's get on to a serious point, like free will and determinism or something, they would go for that. But so when we say, what is the marital status of a man or a woman, that seems to be a very reasonable question. But remember, the ego made up all the concepts. I mean, let's just look at marriage for a moment. Marriage is, if you really pull down to the core meaning of what it stands for, is union. And what we learn as we go deeper into metaphysics is that union can only be in the mind. You can have a unified mind, you can have unified spirit, but you can't have anything in form truly unified, because it was made to be fragmented. So Jesus kind of pokes fun at it by saying minds are joined, bodies do not. He comes right out and says bodies do not. Wow, we're going to have to rethink relationships. Minds are joined, bodies do not. They don't join, they never join. Now we know in quantum physics that actually bodies never touch, ever touch. This is what happens when you get too deep into science. You start to say, well, I think I know about what relationships are, and touch is really important in relationships and so on and so forth. But if you went down to the quantum level, the electrons, some of you might have seen that movie, What the Bleep? Yeah. Do we know when the little boy is bouncing the basketball, and he says, he first throws the basketball at the woman, and she says, Marlee Matlin's the actress, she says, that hurt. And he said, it never touched you. See the difference? The one's saying, you threw the ball at me, and it hit me, and it hurt. And he says, it never touched you. Because he's showing, then he bounces the ball, and he says the electrons push off, but we just have the illusion of bounce. It looks like we've interpreted in the human mind that there's a ball is bouncing off the ground and it's rebounding. It's bouncing. We have an idea of what bounce is, and it's just images, and then they're assigned meaning, and then this meaning is given great importance, even though it's much ado about nothing. And then the more you start to follow the Holy Spirit starts to show you that inside of you, within your mind, is all meaning, and that there is nothing outside of you. Literally, you are a spirit that is all-encompassing and is everything. And what seems to be the projected world is First of all, it's not outside your mind. That's a shocker. It seems like it's out there, even though the quantum physicists like Fred Alan Wolf are saying there's nothing out there. Even the scientists are saying it now. So first of all, that the world is not outside of you, but you believe that it is. So you believe that even the body, Jesus will say, the body is outside you, but it seems to surround you. So you take that one line from Jesus, the body is outside you, but it seems to surround you. And then you take another line from Jesus, there is nothing outside you. And if you put those two together, the body is outside you, and there is nothing outside you, and you get, the body is nothing. And the kingdom of heaven is within you, and everything is within you. Not within your body. So when we say, go inside, we're not talking about going inside the body. Because it's just an image. It's like an image on a screen. You can't really go inside. So it sounds kind of like a mind bender, but what it really is the more you practice this mind training, you just start to have these vast experiences where you feel like they're just so vast and all-encompassing, and you have an experience that you are not contained, or you are not limited, that you are, it's more accurate to say that you're everywhere than it is to say that you're located. But that takes a lot of working through the beliefs and the thoughts. When we talk about this chart, I had a friend one time in Florida who came to me, and she was really good with the power of the mind and hypnosis and everything. And so she decided to use a workbook lesson from A Course in Miracles, just pick a workbook lesson, and to put herself in a hypnotic trance with the workbook lesson. And the one that she picked was, I am not a body. So she just worked with, I am not a body, I'm not a body. She was really good with her hypnosis. So she really worked on putting herself into a hypnotic trance with, I am not a body. And I asked her, well, where did that go? What happened? And she said, well, one day when she looked in the mirror, guess what was gone?
She didn't see yourself.
She literally, like you go to the dentist office and you hypnotize yourself to not feel any pain during the procedure. She had hypnotized herself that she wasn't a body. I am not a body. And she looked in the mirror and the body was gone. There was nobody there. And I said, well, how did that go? And she said, well, I had trouble because I started to, it was around glass. She started to have trouble around glass. I guess she was not aware of her body, so she tried to keep walking through the window panes and the door, the windows and everything, and she said, I felt bruised. I felt hurt. She was still feeling the hurt as if she had a body, but she just couldn't see the body. She had hypnotized. It's kind of like taking an eraser and just going, okay, let's just erase this part. She didn't say there is no world. She still saw the world, but she just erased the body from her perception. And she kept bumping into things and feeling bruised. She felt bruised, even though she didn't see the bruise. She felt bruised. So she said, did I do something wrong? And I said, well, you didn't really follow the instructions of the book. It gives instructions. It didn't tell you, now hypnotize yourself that you're not a body, Jesus doesn't say that. He really has very basic instructions in his book on how to use the workbook. And she was just like coming up with, maybe she thought it would be a shortcut. A body, and that will solve everything. But it didn't. It didn't solve anything. So the more we talked, she came all the way up to Wisconsin from Florida to see me. We spent quite a bit of time talking. She had quite a bit of anger. She had quite a bit of anger at her husband and at men, and that this was like a lot of unresolved anger that was still in her mind. It really needed, it was being based on beliefs that she was still holding on to and interpretations, and that's what we started to focus on, was what she was still believing in, what she was still thinking, and we focused our attention on that, not on hypnotizing herself that she wasn't a body. So that's just an example about how when you do this kind of mind training, you have to really look at the whole system. You have to actually just do what he says and follow the instructions, instead of trying to kind of say, well, okay, you got some good stuff in there, I'm going to make up another plan, for awakening. So it was a good reminder.
Just one more question. If everything out there in the illusion is already decided, what about your life? Is everything what's happening to your body already decided, even if you don't see that the world is, even if you see that the world is an illusion?
Yeah, everything is, you might say, at one point Jesus said that you are participating in a prearranged plan.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a prearranged plan, and really your part in the prearranged plan is to see that it's prearranged, and not try to believe that you have to take on arranging it yourself. It's very different from the way that I believed, growing up. I mean, I was raised in the Protestant work ethic, and you had to carve out your niche, in your life, make a life for yourself, carve out your niche in society, a lot of work and planning and preparation and everything. And this is more, it reminds me of some of those songs. La 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 la, live for today, hey. La 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 la, live for today, and don't worry about tomorrow anyway. I mean, I love music, and the more I get into the deeper realms, it's like, this is what they were singing about. People have been singing and singing and singing about the joy, the carefreeness, the simplicity of knowing that you're loved and that you are loved, and it takes the pressure and the stress out of what seems to be the human condition. The human condition is kind of like, am I there yet? Did I do good enough? Is it, what was the song that Lena Christina was singing? I'm enough. I'm already enough. I'm enough. That's kind of the feeling of when you get into the spiritual realm. It's very relaxed because it's this sense, it's more like a sense of being carried. Like the old footprints in the sand kind of thing, where were you, Lord, when life was the toughest for me? And he's like, I was carrying you. That's why there's only one set of footprints in there. I was carrying you. There's a line in the Course in Miracles where Jesus says, when you have learned to decide with God, all decisions become as right and easy as breathing, and it will be as if you are carried down a quiet path in summer. That's gentle. Carried down a quiet path in summer? Oh, okay. That's what this is supposed to feel like. As easy and as right as breathing, and as if you're carried down a quiet path in summer. How could that be unless you start to realize that when you align your mind with the Holy Spirit, that all decisions are really already accomplished? It would be as simple as saying, oh, what would you have for me today? And you get your instructions. That's pretty simple. What would you have me do today? Oh, okay, all right. And it's even more simple than that. It's not even like you're the doer and the Spirit's up there somewhere, and you just forever have to just follow the commands. Do this, do this, do this, do this. There's a merge that occurs when you merge with the Spirit, the doer disappears. The doer disappears. Because it's the personality self. It's the doer. You know, when we say we're human beings, the focus really is on the being. It's not on the human. The human is the body. The human is what the ego made up, and the being is what the presence of God, what the Spirit's about. So, at the beginning you see yourself as a human being, and therefore metaphors like asking for help and listening to the Holy Spirit are very helpful. But it still seems like there's an asker and one who's giving the instructions. It still seems like there's two. There's the giver and then the receiver. The leader, the Spirit, and the follower. But then the more you follow, and you give yourself over to this, and you just listen and follow, all of a sudden a merge occurs where the doer disappears. And therefore the pressure disappears, the struggle disappears. There's no means to a future end. That's the problem with the doer, is the mind thinks that there is a doer and that there's a future. I'll do this now and I'll rest later. How many of us have said, I'll do this now and then I'll rest? And then when we get to the next thing, I'll do this and later I'll rest. And later and later and later and later.
I do that when I get pension.
Right.
You still do with that?
Yes. Yeah, Henrik's not still here, but Henrik was joined with me, and he talked to me, and that was his whole plan in life, was I'll work hard at all this, and then I'll get my pension, and then I will enjoy life. And so he worked hard, he got his pension, and then it got really worse, really, really worse than he'd ever imagined. It was almost like he was distracted while he was busy working in his career, and then when he retired, he thought everyone told him, you just retire and you'll be happy, you'll just live on your pension and enjoy the good life. But it wasn't that way. It was like he was frustrated, he became depressed, you know, it was like he had to face all of the unconscious thoughts that he had distracted away from while he was working and busy. And then all of a sudden it's like, oh, it was overwhelming. And that's a lot of what we talked about. But in a good sense, it's good. You have to face it sooner or later, so you might as well face it sooner, so you don't put yourself off to do it later, do it later, do it later.
Sounds very scary. I will be 65 this year.
Please help me.
We'll see you back in the field, though. You'll be here processing. Yeah, how many people have gone through that experience where they think that they'll retire, and then it's, in one sense you can say to yourself that it's okay to retire from the thinking of the world, because the thinking of the world is very tiring. It's very complex. It doesn't lead anywhere. It's like a cat chasing its tail. It just goes zooming around until it just gets so dizzy and tired that it just flops down, It's okay to retire from the thinking of the world, but you can do that really at any instant you want. You see how that's so different from retire when you're 65, or retire when you can receive benefits and so on and so forth. It's very future-oriented that way. And I think there was that story in the Bible about saving for the future, and then that night God required the man's life. We can't really live fully as long as we believe that we're on the timeline and that something good or better is going to come in the future. I mean, initially that's a helpful idea, just because if you feel really depressed or doubtful or suicidal, then a better future does sound hopeful. And so we can't deny that it has a place. But then the deeper you start to go into this spirituality, the more you start to realize that this whole idea of tomorrow is part of a trick. In fact, Jesus says in the Course, he says, you cannot be happy, be not content with future happiness, for it is not your just reward, for you have cause for freedom now. So, I know in my life, oh yeah, future happiness, I went with that game I had to have something to hold out for, Future happiness was like, okay, I'll keep plodding along, as long as there's the promise of future happiness. And then the more you get into this teaching, the more it's like, no, there really is no tomorrow. That's just another device that the ego uses to try to trick the mind into staying stuck in the doer. Do, and then finally you'll get to be in the future. But the being is only in the present. It's not ever to be found. It's like dropping a carrot or dropping a prize and then just keep moving the prize as you reach for it. It's the ego's always moving the prize, moving the carrot. I know when I was in high school, and a bit of university too, I called it the I'll be happy when game. I'll be happy when. And it was very tiring, and it was never satisfactory. I never was satisfied with I'll be happy when. I had to start to open my mind to happiness as a present choice, or a present state. That I could start to go for. Like, okay, show me how to get there then, if it's a present choice. So in the end, that's why trust is so important. Jesus has a teacher's manual, he's got 10 characteristics, and the very first one is trust. And then he says that all the other characteristics depend on the first one. And he does say that if the first one goes, then all the rest will go. Honesty, patience, open-mindedness, generosity, all of the characteristics of a teacher of God rest on one thing, and that's trust. And as soon as the trust goes, then everything goes. All of this experience of God is completely out of awareness once the trust is gone. And if you start to think about it, that makes a lot of sense, because if the world, according to the ego, is all based on time, and you've been listening to the ego, and all your sense of safety and security and connection and everything is based on egoic ideas, then you have to learn to trust another voice in order to really be free. The ego doesn't want you free, the ego wants you to remain in prison. And the only way that you can find true freedom is to listen to the Holy Spirit. It's just really the only way that you can find it. But you have to trust that voice. We were talking at lunch today, and Nicholas had told me that Lila had heard yesterday, "Quit your job." She'd heard it very distinctly, very clearly, and she was actually her back was leaning up against Jenny over there, and they were both there, and she heard it very clearly in her mind to quit her job. And her instant response was no. She shot back a quick reply to the guidance. And then she said, ever since that moment, yesterday and then today, it's been like an inner war going on. So what Jesus says is, there are many answers you have received but have not heard. And Jesus says it's not so much hearing the Holy Spirit. It's really, the issue is the willingness to hear the Holy Spirit. If your mind has been used to listening to the ego so long, you kind of say become an ego addict. If you become an ego addict, then to listen to the Spirit seems like a threat. If you have a cocaine addict or a heroin addict or whatever, they're pretty single-focused. They want their next fix. They want their next hit. If you have an alcoholic, they want their next bottle of beer or their next liquor, they're pretty focused on that. And to say, oh, come here, I know a better way. It's not like addicts jump up and go, a better way? Show me immediately. Here's the cocaine. Okay, talk to you later. Some cocaine over here. I can't, I'll hear your better way in a minute. But, the addict needs something. And it's the same with when you've kind of been, the mind's been an ego addict, it's so used to that pattern, that old habitual way of thinking, that the Holy Spirit's a big threat. And it's okay to start to just say, okay, that's just the way that it seems. I had to say, okay, I really have a problem here. I have an ego addiction that I have to come clean from. I used to say that in 12-step groups they all go around and they all have to say, hi, my name is so-and-so, and I have a alcohol problem, or I'm an alcoholic, or whatever, sex addict, or whatever. I was saying with course groups we could go around, we could say, hi, my name is so-and-so, and I have a perceptual problem. Because you have to start to first admit that you have a perceptual problem before you be willing to accept something else. I mean, everybody knows that about an addict, is that until they first admit that they have a problem, there's really going to be no healing. Particularly families of addicts know that until they're going to admit that there's a problem, they're really not interested in the healing, because it's too much denial. No, my life's fine. Fine, fine, fine. How are you doing? Fine. I'm fine. Did you hear me? I'm fine. And families who work with people like that, they're used to that kind of thing that comes back.
Would you say it's the same thing with all kind of diseases?
Yeah.
No matter how.
Yeah, you have to first admit that he's asking about diseases, but you have to first admit that there's a problem before you can accept the correction. But remember, dis-ease, we could say, when you're not at ease, we know from what Jesus teaches us that all illness is mental illness. So whether we were talking about cancer, we were talking about heart disease, or anything you can imagine, respiratory illnesses, and on and on and on, mononucleosis or diabetes or anything, the first step again would be coming back to, hi, my name is so-and-so and I have a perceptual problem. It would be coming to start to admit, first of all, that I have a mental problem, because Jesus is saying all illness is mental illness. It's all a mistaken identity in mind, which is what the mental illness is. And that takes pretty much mind training. You have to unlearn a lot to come back to really admit, I have a mental problem. You could say, I'm mentally retarded. And in one sense that would be accurate, because the learning of the world does retard, or it does hold you back, from your full potential, your highest, your actual potential. So in that sense, you could say that by believing in the ego, I have arrested development. In other words, my potential is opening to my actuality. I'm developing, it seems, towards accepting my actual presence, my actual light reality. But as long as I hold on to the ego belief system, it's arrested. It's it's a stopping of development, of opening to your true Christ self, by holding on to that system.
I wonder what you say about handicap, a little child from the beginning.
Yeah, everything that we perceive in this world is a decision, and also everything is backwards and upside down. So from the human perspective, when we look at, someone would say a handicapped child or a handicapped adult, these are ones that the world would say they are less than normal, or they are underdeveloped, or that they have a handicap is generally referred to as like a limitation. And from the human perspective, you could make a case for that. I remember that was one of the first jobs that the Holy Spirit guided me to in the parable of David, when I had the Course in Miracles in hand, and I was working on it, training my mind, and to pay off my student loans, I was guided by the Holy Spirit to a job at Goodwill Industries, which basically is everyone's handicapped that works at Goodwill. And I was a case manager, so every one of my clients, every day that I worked with, was handicapped. Either it was mental retardation, or schizophrenia, or physical, blind, deaf. I mean, I had a huge range of people. Some of the happiest people I have ever met in my life were the handicapped ones. I started to get a sense that maybe this world is backwards and upside down, because in the world's eyes, they were behind everybody else. They were the problem children, and I felt like I was getting a reflection of true love from them, that they seemed to be unconcerned with a lot of the issues, that the other counselors, that the superiors were all concerned and stressed, and they were the happiest. They were the happiest in the whole place. So we could say that everything is a decision, but remember, because everything's backwards and upside down, that the mind can make decisions, and they can seem to get projected onto the body, but in the end, we're back to that thing that all these different forms are part of the illusion. That you still have to come back to that place of starting to realize that you've been mistaken about everything, including all this stuff about handicap. So when I worked at this Goodwill Industries, I remember I wasn't on the job very long. I was only there a number of weeks, or maybe even just a month or two, and they had this man coming back into the system, and they said, "Oh, you're in big trouble now. He has multiple diagnoses, and he's on multiple drugs, and it's just like he's been in and out of the system over and over. He's just a total mess, and he's yours, David. Yours. You're going to get him. He's coming in, and we're giving him to you." And I remember before I did the intake interview, I just prayed to the Holy Spirit, and the Holy Spirit just said, just pray and meet him in total love. And I asked if there was any preparation, because they had all these books and books written on him, just notes and notes, just binders after binders after binders. He's been in it for years and everything. And I looked at the binders, because that was supposed to be part of my job, to know about who I was going to meet. And I asked the Holy Spirit, and the Holy Spirit said, "No, don't even open the binders. It's better that you know nothing, that I will instruct you how to pray." And that's what that was all about, was meeting him in a prayerful state. And it was a beautiful time together, and all this wisdom was pouring through him. And at some point, maybe after 15, 20 minutes, his name was Doug, I did say, "Doug, where did you learn all that?" And he said, "The Holy Spirit, of course." So it was a big run-up, all the other counselors were telling me that it was going to be the worst days of my life, and da-da-da-da-da, because all this reputation was going on, and the Holy Spirit was like saying, no, that's just a bunch of nothingness, that has no meaning whatsoever. And I had such a close connection with this guy, Doug, that in 8 months, my assignment at that Goodwill Industries was complete. And on the very last day, they were throwing a going away party for me, the staff and everything. And so it was going to be at lunchtime, but they said, you can have your going away party, we want you to come, and da-da-da-da. And then Doug invited me to lunch. And so I had to ask the Holy Spirit, where would you have me be? Guess what the Holy Spirit had me? I missed my own going away party and had lunch with Doug, the problem child, instead on my last day. And then I went in there with as everyone was going back to work, and they said, here's some cake or whatever from your party. It's like, I told you the Holy Spirit's unconventional. Skip the going away party, spend it with him. So to me, that's part of the mind training, is that the key thing is to learn not to judge. That's the only curriculum we have to learn. And in Jesus' psychotherapy pamphlet, Jesus has a sentence, because he put his teachings in psychological, psychotherapeutic terms. And he has one sentence where he says, healing occurs the instant that the therapist forgets to judge the patient. That's pretty strong. When you consider psychotherapy and all the training about defense mechanisms and all the so-called therapy issues and working with it, and he's got one sentence in there, healing occurs the instant that the therapist forgets to judge the patient. How simple it is. We don't need a whole branch of all these different things and techniques and everything, when the very simple lesson is to learn not to judge. Just as for one instant, to see someone without judgment, because we see ourselves, of course, without judgment. Jesus also says, when you meet anyone, remember it's a holy encounter. As you see him, you will see yourself. As you treat him, you will treat yourself. As you think of him, you will think of yourself. And then he says, never forget this. For in him you will find yourself or lose yourself. Some of you are familiar maybe with that Dr. Hugh Lin in Hawaii. It's called Ho'oponopono. And basically it's the same teaching. It's like empty your mind of everything that you think about anyone. He literally was hired to go to a ward, an institute for the criminally insane, and he went there, and there's so much turnover with these directors at this institute for the criminally insane in Hawaii. And when he went there, he just had this feeling that he was there to forgive. And so he started looking through the charts and the papers of all of the clients that are supposed to be under him, and forgiving everything that he saw on the charts. Did he do intake interviews? No. He didn't even talk to these people. Now how's that for a psychotherapist? Not even talking to the client. That would be like, He simply took their files and he forgave. He said, everything in these files must be what my consciousness is showing me. That's why I've got these files in front of me. And all these files contain are a bunch of judgments. And I need to free my mind and release everything in every one of these files. And he didn't even interview the people. He would see them in the halls, and he didn't even call them into his office and didn't even chat with them. He simply did it all. and he cleared the entire ward. They had to shut down the entire institution. He not only didn't last as the director because they had to shut the institution down. He lost his job. He forgave himself out of a job because he saw that everything that was in these folders about these so-called criminally insane people, clients, were just simply judgments. So that's really how powerful the mind is, you know. And, you know, with Lila receiving this guidance, you're to quit your job, you know, she just told me at lunch, she said that she had the typical things, like she's renting an apartment, like, oh yeah, and where is the rent going to come from? You know, and immediately the ego went to work, in almost like a very logical way, you know, starting to make a case. The initial reaction was no, and then the ego immediately started to build a case to support the no. And then her partner Nicholas had been feeling the same thing, like, oh, it's time for you to move on. He hadn't spoken it, but then they're starting to get more and more guidance. You don't just get the guidance, quit your job, and then you're just left there with no more instructions, you know. That's just like one instruction, and then the next instruction comes, and then the next, and the next. And it's like you have to be led, you know, to this place of perfect oneness and forgiveness, so the instructions come. But it's really great just to be able to watch your reactions sometimes to these things that come in. I have to say, I mean, I think back to some of the things I was guided to do, and certainly I resisted and had reactions. I mentioned, I think, yesterday, I believe it was, when I was guided to transfer from one university program to another, that I literally resisted the guidance over and over and over until I started making myself sick, and I could see that I was just fighting myself, and then I stopped. Then there was such a sense of relief when I finally just went, okay, all right. And then, you know, that's the way it goes for us. When we resist it, it's a struggle. When we just yield into it, it's very sweet.